to catch these things, although you can certainly tie one that's too big to cast. I caught a few fish, including some surprisingly large cutthroats and one fat bull trout that measured 26 inches and probably weighed 6 or 7 pounds. No more than a nice bull trout by local standards. The guide actually guessed it at 8 or 9 pounds, but I'd fished with this guy before and knew he tended to inflate fish size to pump up the clients, which I think is a forgivable bit of showmanship. As I said, there wasn't a lot of detailed information about fishing for bull trout, and I wondered about that. If you were unaware of the sometimes complicated aesthetics of fly fishing, you might assume that fishermen would naturally go after the biggest fish in the river. Some locals do, but I think the guides rightly concluded that most of their clients would rather catch 15 or 20 cutthroats on dry flies than dredge streamers and sink tips all day for 1 or 2 bull trout. Also, a lot of visiting fishermen just aren't familiar with them. Bull trout were probably never widely distributed, but it's hard to tell for sure, because for years they were commonly mistaken for Dolly Vardens or Arctic char, 2 other members of the same family. In fact, it was only in the 1970s that the American Fisheries Society formally recognized bull trout as a separate species and not just a regional name for dollies. According to Robert J. Benke in Trout and Salmon of North America, it was at that point that the world record Dolly Varden, weighing 32 pounds, abruptly became the world record bull trout. Like many large predators in North America, bull trout have been seriously beaten down over the years, both inadvertently and on purpose. Habitat destruction from commercial logging hasn't been kind to them, and neither have dams. Bull trout have been known to make incredibly long spawning migrations. One biologist said that in that way they're like inland steelhead, and for that they need the vast lengths of undammed river systems that have become increasingly rare. Fishing pressure has been hard on them, too. Bull trout have the habit of staging at the mouths of small streams in late summer before they run up the creeks to spawn. And when they're concentrated like that, they're easy pickings for greedy fishermen, including those who resort to the use of snagging hooks. It's probably that habit that gave them their scientific name. My Latin is more than a little rusty, but I'm pretty sure Salvelinus confluentis means something like char of the confluence. As if all that weren't enough, bull trout were also once persecuted as undesirable varmints because they ate cutthroats, so they were commonly caught and thrown on the bank to rot in large numbers. In some places, there were even bounties on bull trout, but that was before both fish managers and fishermen began to ask themselves how the cuts had managed to survive in the same water with bull trout in the millennia before humans showed up. In fact, there's a good argument that the large cutthroats in parts of British Columbia are there precisely because hungry bull trout keep their numbers in check, leaving more food for the survivors. Today, you can still find bull trout in parts of 5 western states, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and a thin sliver of northern Nevada, as well as much of Alberta and virtually all of British Columbia. But bull trout have been declared a threatened species here in the United States. At this writing, there are a few selected waters where you can fish for them on a limited basis, but for the most part, if you catch a bull trout in the United States, it had better be by accident, and you had better release it. It's more or less the same story in Alberta, where bull trout are blue-listed, roughly the equivalent of threatened, and you're not supposed to fish for them on purpose. But in BC, their populations are large, healthy, and widely enough distributed that, with the exception of some catch-and-release regulations and seasonal closures for spawning, you can pretty much fish for them wherever you can find them. It's probably not overstating the case much to say that if you want to fish for bull trout without too many complications or pangs of conscience, you should go to British Columbia. On our last trip to BC, my friends Doug Powell and Vince